Do you remember Tactical Masters? The set where you may or may not have pulled for the best archetype in the game for two big reasons, or the absolute worst in card design at the time? Do you know there was actually a third archetype in that set? Some sort of Vaylantz? That's right, the bulk you threw away was part of a unique deck that combines fan favorite mechanics like rolling dice, flipping coins, and moving monsters. If you like pendulums, feeling smarter than your opponents, and scooping because you messed your combo up 5 minutes ago, Vaylantz may be the deck for you. By the end of this needlessly complicated guide that nobody asked for, like me, you too will become an expert in all things Vay to Z. Let's take a look at the mechanics of the archetype. Vaylantz monsters have the shared pendulum effect to special summon themselves from the pendulum zone to the main monster zone in the same column. The low level Vaylantz lock into special summoning Vaylantz for the rest of the turn, except from your extra deck, while the high levels require the appropriate fail spell or Vaylantz of the same attribute to be unfailed to special summon themselves. As every Vaylantz can special summon itself, the deck doesn't actually need to use its normal summon, allowing you to use it for some powerful payoffs or just to normal summon Alistair. As for their monster effects, Vaylantz typically have two effects. An ignition effect, which in the case of the low level Vaylantz requires them to be special summoned to be used, and a trigger effect that activates when they are moved to a different monster zone. Figure out how to trigger these effects and which of them to trigger is key to playing Vaylantz well. For an example of this, let's look at one of the key cards in our deck, Shinonome the Vaylantz Priestess. It is the standard Vaylantz Pendulum effect, and during your main phase if you control the special summon card, you can add one Vaylantz spell from your deck to your hand. Often we'll use this to search solo activation, but we may search the fail spells depending on the combo. If she's moved to another monster zone, she lets you search your deck for a Vaylantz monster and add it to your hand. Shinonome gets you access to all the cards in your archetype, and most of our combos rely on getting to her as fast as possible. Vaylantz Awakening solo activation is a normal spell that lets you scale a Vaylantz Pendulum monster from your deck when activated, effectively serving as a rota for the deck. Most of the time you'll be using this to find Shinonome unless you already have access to her. You can also banish it from the grave if there's a card in the fail zone to move a monster to an adjacent monster zone, helping trigger our movement effects. Our main ways to trigger our Vaylantz monsters are Vaylantz Buster Baron and Nezuki the Vaylantz Ninja. They both have the monster effect to target our monster and move it to an adjacent monster zone, but Nezuki is the better of the two, not only able to move our monsters, but also having a useful second effect to special summon a Vaylantz from our spell and trap zone when moved. Being a level 5 Vaylantz, it can also be used as a material for our contact fusions. Many of our combos will require Nezuki, but if we can't get access to him, Baron will help us trigger our effects. Apart from Shinonome, Vaylantz has several other ways to generate card advantage, the first of which is Vaylantz Voltage Viscount. During your main phase, if you control this special summon card, you can place a face-up Vaylantz Pendulum monster from your extra deck into the spell or trap zone as a continuous spell. Note that even if you do place into a corner spell or trap zone, it is not considered as having been scaled and will not be able to use its pendulum effects. To get around this, we can use the previously mentioned Nezuki or the fail spell Shinra Bancho to special summon it. Viscount's effect when moved is to scale a face-up Vaylantz Pendulum monster from your extra deck, allowing it to use its pendulum effect and be used for a pendulum summon. Viscount is caught in many of the deck's combos and is usually the second or third Vaylantz we want to search. We also have Vaylantz Mad Marquess, which allows us to roll a dice and excavate for a Vaylantz card. If it's moved, it also sometimes lets us special summon a monster from the spell and trap zone. As both of Marquess's effects are random, we won't be relying on him for most of our combos, but if we start with Nezuki, we generally can work him into our combo for a bit of extra card advantage. The Vaylantz fail spells are unique. They both have the mandatory effect when activated to place the other face up in your opponent's fail zone. This has the benefit of outing any fail spells your opponent may have, as well as turning off cards like Evenly Matched and Infinite Impermanence. If there's a card in both fail zones, they give the turn player an effect they can activate. Shinra Bancho lets the turn player special summon a monster from their spell and trap zone, acting as an extender, while Cunning Wisdom lets the turn player move an opponent's monster into their spell and trap zone, serving as removal. As these are effectively the same cards since they search each other, you generally want to search Cunning Wisdom to make it easier to destroy it yourself. Never leave it up for your opponent to use to break your board. What would a Pendulum deck be without its skills? The main high skill we'll be using in this deck is Vaylantz Genesis Grand Duke, a Pendulum Fusion monster with a skill of 10 that can be special summoned by tributing a level 5 or higher Vaylantz in the same column as an extra monster zone. It has a monster effect that's largely irrelevant, and the Pendulum effect is special summon itself from the Pendulum zone or move a monster to an adjacent monster zone. We'll be looking to scale this using Voltage Viscount in many of our combos, but when our combo gets interrupted, we'll have to use Beyond the Pendulum to search for a Pendulum monster to complete our skills instead. As all our main deck Vaylantz have low skills, we have to look outside the archetype for help. Magic Calibra is a normal pendulum monster with the skill effect a lower monster's level and increase another's by the same amount, giving you access to combo routes you wouldn't otherwise have. Unfortunately, it also comes with a bad skill of 5, making you prone to getting stuck in your skill. The Pendulum Spirits are a good generic option. They each have a unique monster effect, none of which I've read, and they also bounce themselves from the Pendulum Zone whenever you Pendulum Summon, as well as coming with an amazing skill of 9, which is only beaten by the literal 10. Similarly, Vaylantz has several options in deck building depending on what you want from the deck. If you're looking to run extenders, the Vaylantz monsters only lock us for the rest of the turn, so any Pendulum monster can special summon itself before our combo will work. Whether you want the simplicity of Curtain Raiser or the synchro access of Wakaushi, both are good options with their own pros and cons. If you're looking for extra consistency, consider running Small World. There's a lot of words on this card, but what's important is that by simply running Gizme Okami the Dreaded Deluge Dragon as a bridge, you can turn any Vaylantz in your hand into any other Vaylantz, boosting your consistency as long as you can tolerate the loss in card advantage. If you're not running the Cyberstein or Fossil Diner combos in your deck, you may want to run other engines to make use of the normal summon. Our old friend Alistair shows his face here, but there are others you could be running, such as the Spellbook engine for more card draw, or a tuner like Performer or Odd Eye Synchron or Deep Sea Diva for synchro access, allowing you to end on cards like Herald, Baron, and Borreload Savage for extra interruptions. Vaylantz endboards are diverse. As they don't lock their extra deck, they have access to their own boss monsters as well as other generic options. Mamanaka the Vaylantz United is a Pendulum Fusion monster that requires 3 Vaylantz monsters to fusion summon. As a quick effect, it can target a monster in your opponent's main monster zone and turn it into a continuous spell in the same column. As this is the only Vaylantz Fusion monster that can't be contact fused, if you want to make it, you'll have to run Hojo the Vaylantz Warrior and trigger its movement effect. Unless you're insistent on playing the deck pure, we have better options. Arctis 12 is a Pendulum Fusion monster that can be contact fused with 2 level 5 or higher Vaylantz monsters. It has the quick effect to solve the positions of 2 monsters either player controls, as well as the ability to destroy a card on the field when a monster moves. Arctis 12 is a fantastic boss monster, being easy to make and offering disruption as well as the ability to trigger our Vaylantz effects. Outside of the archetype, we have Cyberstein. This version of the deck aims to make Gigant X with 2 Viscounts, using its effect to search a Cyberstein from our deck. As we do not use our normal summon, we can simply normal summon Cyberstein and use its effect to special summon Nichira Exterior from our extra deck, giving us a non-once per turn spell and trap negate. We can also end on Fossil Diner in a similar way. This time, we search it using Gallant Granite, a generic rank 4 with the effect to search a rock monster. We then normal summon the Fossil Diner, preventing both players from special summoning while it's on the field. Finally, we protect it by searching Performer or Greatest Duelist, a high skill that protects Fossil Diner from battle destruction once per turn. There are several other options of course. You can use Artifact Dagda to set up Artifact Scythe and pop it with Arctis 12. You can use Majesty Pegasus the Draco Slayer to search Floodgate fail spells like Necro Valley or Secret Village. And you always have the generic options like IP Masquerena and Appaloosa. Vaylantz have a ton of different options for their endboards, and which is the best will depend on your current meta. Vaylantz combos may seem daunting, but they're manageable once broken down. We'll be going over the order you should get cards into rotation, where you should position your cards, and then demonstrate some basic combos. When getting pieces into rotation, you'll want to find Shinonome, Nezuki, then Viscount in that order. If you already have a way to move Shinonome, you may want to search for Viscount before Nezuki, but generally this is the order most of our combos will use. Unlike other decks, positioning is crucial for Vaylantz. Summoning a monster in the wrong zone can ruin the rest of our combo. Let's look at what each zone is useful for. As Vaylantz monsters can only special summon themselves from the Pendulum skill to the zone directly in front of them, those zones are the most important and should be kept clear when possible. Next, because Vaylantz effects usually move monsters to adjacent zones, the next zone should be kept clear when you're planning on triggering a movement effect. This means that the middle zone is usually the safer zone to summon to. However, as our Pendulum monsters usually point to the bottom left and bottom right, we have to make sure it's clear when we're preparing to Pendulum summon, and avoid summoning monsters we want to keep on board there, instead summoning them to the zones in the extra monster zone column. With that in mind, let's look at some basic combos. We'll be using the Cyberstein variant of the deck for these combos, but most Vaylantz decks will follow similar lines. This is the main combo of the deck and requires access to Shinonome and a mover, with solo activation being able to substitute for either of them. We begin by scaling Shinonome and using a pendulum effect to special summon herself. Then we use the effect to search for a Vaylantz spell, in this case the fail spell Conic Wisdom, which we will go ahead and activate, placing Shinra Bancho in your opponent's fail zone. Next, we scale Baron and use its effect, special summoning itself. We then use its effect to move Shinonome to the adjacent monster zone and trigger her effect, searching us our Viscount. Now we can use both of them to link summon Heavy Metal Force Electromite. Using its link summon effect, we will send a Pendulum monster from our deck to the extra deck. Since we started with Baron, we have to send Nazuki here, but if we started with Nazuki, we could send Marquez instead. We then scale Viscount and special summon it using its own effect. Activating its effect, we will place the Nazuki from our extra deck into the spell and trap zone, making sure to place it in the same column as an extra monster zone. Now, we can use Shinra Bancho to special summon the Nazuki from our spell and trap zone. As it is in the same column as an extra monster zone, we can use it as a material to contact fuse our Grand Duke. Using Electromite's effect, we will destroy our fail spell and add the Nazuki from our extra deck to our hand. We then go ahead and scale and special summon the Nazuki using its own effect. Using the Nazuki and the Grand Duke as materials, we will contact fuse from Octo's 12. Now, we use Octo's 12's effect to swap its position with that of Viscount's, triggering the Viscount's effect to scale Grand Duke from our extra deck. From here, we link summon Beyond the Pendulum, searching our second Viscount to complete our scales. We proceed to Pendulum Summon, specifically Pendulum Summoning Nazuki and Viscount from the extra deck to these zones. We then use the scale effect of Grand Duke to move Nazuki to an adjacent zone, triggering its effect to special summon our Viscount from the spell and trap zone. From here, we overlay both Viscounts for Yugioh X, using its effect to detach a material to search the Cyberstein from our deck. We then normal summon the Cyberstein, pay 5000 life points and special summon the Nichira Exterior. Finally, we link the Beyond the Pendulum and the Cyberstein into a Sprite Elf, and the Yugioh X and the Nazuki into an IP Masquerader. This combo requires solo activation and any Pendulum extender. We'll be using Curtain Raiser as a generic example. We begin by using our extender before we lock ourselves with Shinonome. Next, we activate solo activation, scaling a Shinonome from the deck. We then use a Pendulum effect to special summon herself, activating her other effect to search us our fail spell Conic Wisdom. We will then activate the Conic Wisdom, placing Shinra Bancho in our opponent's fail zone. Using the Grave effect of solo activation, we will move and trigger Shinonome, this time searching us our Viscount. Now we link summon Heavy Metal Force Electromite, using its effect to send a Nazuki from our deck to our extra deck. From here, we will scale and special summon Viscount using its own effect. Activating its other effect, we will place the Nazuki from the extra deck into the spell and trap zone in the same column as the extra monster zone. Like before, we will use Shinra Bancho to special summon it and use it to contact fuse the Grand Duke. Using Electromite's effect, we will now destroy our fail spell and add the Nazuki from the extra deck to our hand. We scale and special summon the Nazuki, and using the Grand Duke and Nazuki as material, we contact fuse for Octo's 12. Now, we use Octo's 12's effect to sort the positions of it and Viscount, triggering the Viscount to scale the Grand Duke from the extra deck. We can now proceed to link summon our Beyond the Pendulum, searching the second voltage Viscount to complete our scales. Scaling it, we Pendulum summon the Viscount and Nazuki from our extra deck to these zones. We now activate the scale effect of our Grand Duke to move Nazuki, triggering its effect to special summon our second Viscount from the spell and trap zone. From here, we once again overlay both of them into a Yugioh X, searching a Cyberstein from our deck. We now normal summon it, pay 5000 life points, and special summon the Nichira Exterior from our extra deck. Finally, we will once again link the Beyond the Pendulum and Cyberstein off for a Sprite Elf, as well as the Yugioh X and Nazuki off for IP Masquerader. If you're unlucky enough to not draw any of the previous combinations, Shinonome can set up a passable first turn board on her own. This combo differs from the previous combos as we will not be able to get access to the fail spells. We once again begin by scaling Shinonome and special summoning her using her own effect. This time, we use her effect to grab solo activation. We will activate the solo activation to scale a Nazuki from our deck, which we will then special summon using its own effect. Activating its effect, we will use it to move our Shinonome, triggering her effect to search for a Viscount. We now link summon Heavy Metal Force Electromite and use this effect to send Marquez from our deck to our extra deck. We scale and special summon our Viscount like before, using its effect to place any Vaylantz from our extra deck into our spell and trap zone. This time, we will destroy with Electromite to add the Marquez from our extra deck to our hand. As we can't efficiently make and scale Grand Duke in this line, we will instead have to link summon Beyond the Pendulum to search for a high skill instead. In this case, the Kaiden Denko Spirit. We now scale the Marquez and the high skill to Pendulum Summon. Pendulum summoning our Viscount and our Nezuki. Afterwards, we special summon the Marquez from our skill using its own effect. We can then use its other effect to try and excavate our Vaylantz card. Using the Marquez and the Nezuki, we contact Fuse for Arctus 12, using it to sort the positions of itself and the Viscount to scale a Shinonome from our extra deck for next turn. Here are some sample deck lists for the different variants of the deck. These definitely aren't optimized, but they'll serve as a good starting point for you to figure out how you like to personally build it. Be sure to tweak the ratios to your personal preference and swap out cards to tech against the current meta. And that's everything you need to know to play Vaylantz. Although the deck is nowhere close to being meta, it's still a competent deck that utilizes mechanics in ways no other deck really does. For all its faults, Vaylantz certainly is one of the decks of all time.